The Naira inches closer to 1,000 Naira per dollar in the black market, and this is in the latest economic development. The Nigerian Naira has experienced a significant downturn, reaching an unprecedented low of 925 Naira per dollar on the parallel market. Now, this drop is primarily attributed to a surge in the demand for foreign currency, surpassing the available supply. This occurrence follows the recent shift in foreign exchange policy, marking a distinct departure from the approach during the tenure of President Muhammadu Buhari. Now, in contrast to the prior administration, the current leadership under President Tinubu has embraced a more open stance on foreign exchange. Now, during the previous administration, international institutions like the World Bank, alongside experts in the fields of banking, finance, and economics, frequently voiced concerns about the dual valuation of the Naira. This system was seen as detrimental to the economy, enabling a select few to amass substantial profits without generating tangible output. Now, these individuals capitalized on the differences between the official rate, that's the official exchange rate provided by the central bank, and the higher rate in the black market. Now, to join us this morning to discuss the forex market and its implications on the as the Naira slides on the economy, we have Dr. Emeka Ukengu, a development economist, joining us via Zoom. And we also have Dr. Obinaya Uruakba. He's a public affairs analyst, and he joins us in the studio. Good morning, Mr. Dr. Obinaya. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, now, I think we've all heard that the Naira actually plunged to a record 925 Naira per dollar, which is really, really, really high. Now, on the parallel market on Wednesday, because the demand for, Forex increased as against the supply. Rumors have it that it's actually gradually inching towards 1,000 Naira per dollar. How bad or how detrimental is this on our economy?
Let me add to what Hussein has said. Last year in 2022, analysts sat on this matter, and they actually, predicted that this was going to happen. The Naira was going to hit 1,000. And Daily Trust had an interview with one of the people in the black market who said that they're actually looking at it, to surpass the 1,000. Yes. So what's your take on that?
I think it speaks for itself. It speaks for itself. A country with 774 local government areas, 36 states plus FCT 37, has consistently for over 60 years depended on imports. Almost every country that has a strong currency has a strong productive base. And when you produce, you export more and you earn more. To the extent that you're not exporting enough, you're not going to have enough in your reserves. And if you continue to borrow, and you know how heavily borrowed we are, not just for infrastructure, but for consumption, you're going to pay a price. And then if you have an economy that is import dependent, and even the consumption patterns of our people is foreign oriented, you're going to suffer. So the way I'm dressed, the way you're dressed, helps the textile industry. By extension, the agri sector, because this is cotton. You have a 208 million population records. I'm sure we're more than that. Imagine if 1 million of them dressed the way we dressed. And then imagine if we invested, talking about energy, if we had energy and reduce the energy cost, and you had UNTL in Kaduna, where most of those who used to work there have either been thrown out of jobs or become Okada riders or Keke Napep riders. And you have the Akwete cloth in our industry in Aba that used to dress a lot of people and employ people. Now you can see it's a multiplicity of several things. And then you're talking about insecurity also. You're talking about political instability. We're still in court. So potential investors who would have come here have sat back to watch and see what would happen. To the extent that they are not bringing inflows into this country, you're going to have a challenge with foreign exchange earnings. The other challenge is the instability within the polity. Security, politics, and so on, which I mentioned earlier, has led to the departure of many companies. GlaxoSmithKline just left. Before then, you had a lot of the Dunlop and so on. I was in Ghana in June. Painfully, something interesting happened, that Ghana even has borrowed $3 billion. And I began to research to question why Ghana was borrowing. Meanwhile, while I was there, Ghana became #1 again in gold production. But what I found out was, as much as Ghanaians told me that COVID was what led to them having an economic recession and all of that, I still suspect that it comes down to governance. It comes down to them needing to understand that to the extent that they leverage on their relationship in ECOWAS, for instance, as simple as Irish potatoes that you can get in Bocos, Ghana struggles and sometimes imports from elsewhere, including apparel. So if you look at it, it's not just Nigeria. We are in ECOWAS, where you have free movement of persons and goods. How does Nigeria benefit from that? Now, if Ghana needs Irish potatoes, all that needs to happen is we move Irish potatoes from Plateau State and give to them. I'm trying to be as simple as possible. Bring it to the level of the layman, so we don't complicate it with jargons. The truth of the matter is, if we increase our power generation and distribution to beyond 5,000 megawatts, are we even up to 5,000? And then people are able to manufacture, then we are able to have local substitutes for the things that we import. Now, we do not have enough power. Manufacturing firms are shutting down. We had the cashless challenge in January, and that affected including poultry farmers who lost over 60% of their eggs.
Yeah, I remember that.
There are a lot of policy issues that have affected the things that have happened in the economy. And then at the heart of it is beyond what the government at the authority levels are doing. Those of us who are followers, our consumption patterns. If you cannot drink custard, if custard is not imported, we can also drink akamu. But again, how do you get the maize to make the akamu, or the millet to do the other type of cocoa? How do you get that when the farmers are not able to get into the farms?
You saying this
plant
actually,
and harvest.
Yes, it actually reminds me of a report by our business correspondent. She actually did a report, and it was verified by Smitten that startups or even small businesses in Nigeria have a lifespan of 3 years because of the harsh policies.
It goes beyond that. There is a 2014 report you need to go see by Smeden, Small Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, where my big brother Wale Fason is DG, and then of course National Bureau of Statistics. That report says that you have over 32.9 micro, small and medium enterprises operating in Nigeria. There's a report that came out a week and some days ago that says that over 42% of those micro, small and medium enterprises are women. Yeah? Now, I don't want to go into all of those issues, but at the heart of it is that the MSME sector, micro, small and medium enterprises sector, where I play, drives almost every economy. So when you hear the expression Asian tigers, people who do buttons, who do needles, who do a few things, who employ 2 to 5 persons in a small room and are able to help drive the economy. The federal government of Nigeria and the subnational, state and local government areas are not able to employ more than 5% of the economy. And it happens everywhere. That's why in America you have the SBA, the Small Business Administration. In Canada you have different places where they are able to mentor and handhold and help them and create an enabling environment. Nigeria, you remember the PBEC, the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Committee, tried as much as possible to help us move away from the position, a low position where we were, to climb to a position where we were able to encourage ease of doing business. Tax, company registration, NAFDAC issues, Standards Organization of Nigeria issues, making it easy for people to use, let me use potato again, to do what you call French fries, or use yam to do flour, or use palm oil to make soap. For over 10 years, we've had over 600,000 metric tons deficit in palm oil, where if you want to make soap today, my sister, for your skin, for a population that you know is ready to consume that, you may need to go to Malaysia that actually took our palm kernel sometime in 1970, 71, 72. And then we have to now import. And then much of the palm oil you see around here, much of the palm oil you see around here is actually smuggled in.
Wow. So initially, your point is we need to, go back
Put your house in order
to the whole agriculture. Okay. So this question will be for Dr. Emeka Okengu, the development economist that's joining us via Zoom. So, Doctor, during the inauguration of the President Tinubu, he said that monetary policy needs a thorough cleaning, where he said that the central bank must work in unifying the exchange rate. But on June 14, 2023, the CBN abolished, of course, the segmentation of the forex market into different windows to deposit money banks to freely float the naira against the dollar and other international currencies. Now, buyers and sellers now of the foreign currency can actually decide the price that they will sell, or buy these currencies. So the CBN no longer dictates like before. And one of the people in the black market that Daily Trust had an interview with he said that if the CBN don't come back, to tell the actual price, have a price control on this issue, then it's going to get worse. What's your take on that?
Well, the man from the primary market or black market is very correct. You talked about the monetary policy, but I think you missed out, the fiscal responsibility aspect of it, which is as key as the monetary policy. I think what happened was that there was some kind of disjointment of both sectors, if you may, or both programs or policies. At one time, you had the person in charge of the fiscal policy, saying publicly that they didn't even understand what the CBN was doing. But that is at the front end. The major issue we have in Nigeria is that we've lost, or we don't understand the use of statistics and mathematics. What am I trying to say? Until you become statistical and mathematical, you can't move from where we are or where we were 60 years ago. Today, everybody will tell you that you have a country of over 200 million people. I mean, that simple word is even aberration in itself when you want to talk about development planning or national planning, because you must be statistical and mathematical in doing your planning, in understanding. If you don't know how many you are, how do you know how many people you're going to feed? How do you know what you need to do the feeding? My brother in the studio had talked about palm oil coming from Malaysia and then taking palm oil from us. The sad aspect of palm oil was that, if you're a geographer or you're an heir, from his name, I think both of us come from the same region. The colonial administration in Eastern region used palm oil to ring the whole of the Eastern region. And I'm just not talking about the Southeast. If you followed the palm trail, you could just get it all around. It went from Enugu and circled all the way to Port Harcourt, Uyo, Cross River, and all those states within the Southeastern region. Now, what did that mean? It meant that in developing that volume, it became a lot easier for them to now be able to bring the value, which is why we became one of the biggest producers of palm, in the world. This is ditto for groundnut. In northern Nigeria, where you and Haja, comes from, you also had the groundnut belt that was running almost all across the whole of what you call the northern region now, from where you go, the northeast to the northwest. You had it all the way from Chigawa. It traveled all the way to Kebbi. And that now led, to the establishment of those, groundnut pyramids. And the funny and annoying part of this is that the infrastructure that were built by the trade in those commodities happened to be the biggest and the tallest you have in each of these regions. In Kaduna, the 10-story building, was built with money, that was a revenue from groundnut. It remains the tallest, biggest infrastructure, public facility infrastructure built. Ditto for the ACB building, ditto for the net building in the Southwest Nigeria. So I think the major problem we have as a country is that we've not been able to do what you call development thinking. Now, development thinking will be, what were the policies that ran your colonial administration? How come they were able to do so well what infrastructure around this they are doing well. And then in now doing a backtrack, what do we now need to put into place to be able to have a fiscal, act or fiscal responsibility program that now aligns positively with your monetary policy? First and foremost, let me say this, and with a lot of respect, to us as Nigerians, we don't have a currency that can stand anywhere. And you see, when you talk about the Committee of States, it is the value of your currency that gives you, a seat in that Committee of States. And then what gives you that currency is what that currency, or gives you that value, is what that currency is trading against. Which is why at the point in time we're trading granules. For those of us who were undergraduates at that time, who were flying into London on student rebate tickets of then 5,000, then it became 7,000, and I think there was a protest. 7,000 Naira, and then you could walk out of that airport. Those days it used to be Heathrow, walk onto the high streets of England and spend Naira. It was because Naira had value. So it would be rude and maybe a little bit not right, okay, unpatriotic for me to say that, we have a currency that is valueless. But when you juxtapose it against, the other currencies, you are forced to even come to this reality, which is why in the CBN intervening, by putting subsidies on the Naira, we now made another mistake. At that point in time, they were subsidizing the Naira. We should have taken a very prompt, proactive measure to make certain that we had production up and running. If you go to the Dawano market today and you wanted 1 million, bags of granules and peanuts, you probably will get them. Okay, but there was no aggregation to now begin to now put what you call the midstream values into it that can actually now qualify it to be traded in international markets. It was still being sold, as industrial inputs, and they got lost. It's like today, I don't know if you're going to get that in this course of this conversation. We're talking about this DSDP, where you had us taking our crude out and then had us bring in, the finished products. Now, some people argue that would have been the end of subsidy, but has it helped us in also now curbing the price of petroleum? It hasn't. You know why? Because that trade is dominated in Forex. So the moment you do that exchange, you now come and transfer it and change it back into your local currency, and it will mean nothing. Truly, the person who predicted 1,000, I predicted this, I don't know if it was on a television station or some other. I said, wait for it, it's going to happen. The moment you remove this subsidy, that you're putting on Naira, okay, the moment you put this official pricing, if you may call it, for better understanding, you're going to see the thing fly out of the window. It's going to be valueless. People now value, a friend of mine needed to go to Germany, and then I made a call to an agent, and then I saw his face was turning all colors. And he said, hold on, please, let me call you back. He put his phone on speaker, and the guy says, please tell me what you said again. He says, return tickets, economy 3 million. Right. And he said to me, what the hell is going on? I said, nothing is going on. They are converting your Naira into dollar. Right. That price hasn't changed by $1 in the dollar, value. It is your own currency that is thickening. But it is not all hopeless. What is important is that if we are able to do the right things and then put in the right frameworks, and like I said, the first and the most important that is lacking and missing is data. If we do not have a proper data of our human resources, you can't turn those human resources into capital. If you do not have proper data and statistics on your raw materials, you cannot turn those raw materials into goods. If you do not have proper data on both your human capital and your raw materials, you cannot begin to now build the infrastructure that can support both their development. So I think that is where, the problem is hinged.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Okengu, for joining us in the studio this morning and for your analysis. All right, let's come back to you, Dr. Orakpa. Now, hearing Dr. Okengu, talking about hearing him talk about how the Naira actually had value back then, even in England, just brought me to the question, because back then we used to hear our stakeholders talk about how they're planning on strengthening the Naira making it compete with the dollar. But we don't even hear, that happening anymore. When will the demand for the dollar or foreign exchange actually stop? When will we get to a point where, there's parity between the Naira and the dollar, where it gets to compete 1 Naira to $1 in Nigeria?
Okay. What God cannot do does not exist.
So we're back to hoping as Nigerians.
No, we're very spiritual. I want to thank Dr. Kengu. He's someone I follow very closely. In fact, he has done an end-to-end analysis for you, and he took you back in history. I think what Chinua Achebe said, if you don't know where the rain started beating you, you will not know where it stopped. And the person that asks questions does not miss their way. But the Yorubas will also tell you that when two siblings walk into a room like this and come out smiling, they have lied to each other. Let us stop using rhetorics. Let's stop using rhetorics. Like he said, the cocoa house you have in the West, go and find out what Awolowo did. What Chief Obafemi Awolowo did in the Southwest. Go and find out what Michael Okpara did in the Southeast. As simple as the poetry. Find out how you have poetry at the back of almost every house in the Southeast, which has extended to the rest of Nigeria. Find out the farm settlement system, which now has helped you to have the University at Umudike. Find out the Karona Moda, what happened in Karona Moda, and look at the map of Nigeria and see the train intersection and the train movements in Nigeria, where you pick from Karona Moda, come down to Jos and pick the tin, and move to Southwest and pick the cocoa, and get to the seashore, the seafront, and move it out. And then come down from Maiduguri and go through Aleade in Benue State, and come down to Enugu and take the farm produce and get to Port Harcourt, and then move out there. Now, if you look at the structure, yes, initially we used to say this is what the colonial masters did to us, this structure, but we can use the same structure since we're now independent. Now, there's a document you need to go see. I've mentioned it here several times, just to buttress what Dr. Kengu said. It's called the One Local Government, One Product, which Dupe Adelaja and her team at Smeden visited Japan to go see. In Japan, you have the One Village, One Product OVOP. Now, we have One Local Government, One Product. Almost every local government area in Nigeria has at least one commodity she has comparative advantage on. It may not be agricultural, it may be solid mineral, it may be something else. I'll give you an example of Zobo. You drink Zobo, yeah?
Yes,
good.
Do.
Go look for hibiscus. About 7 years ago, I believe the quarantine service documented, I'm talking about documented statistics, Doc talked about statistics, that Nigeria exported $35 million worth of hibiscus flower. Hibiscus is what you have in Zobo. And guess, 85%, talking about statistics and data, 85% of that export went to one country alone. Guess the country? Mexico. And I had lunch with an ex-senator, and he told me that he just came back from Cancun, and that almost every drink in Mexico has a component of hibiscus in it. So why can't Nigeria stay on her strengths? The low-hanging fruit for Nigeria is agriculture. Resolve issues around insecurity. Deal with infrastructure. We have had the second Niger bridge. Make sure that at least there's security to ensure that we don't destroy the rails and so on. And then we, the citizens, also need to be spoken to. But that's even a low-level discussion to have for now. But the fact remains that if we open up the hinterlands, make sure the roads, I travel a lot. I travel across Nigeria. I just came back from Numan. To travel from Yola to Numan is 45 minutes. The Omo and the dry fish I came back with from Numan, well, amazing. I went to conduct an entrepreneurship training there. And about 100 people sitting in a room told me that all they needed was to move out what they have to Lagos where it can be bought. Almost on a daily basis, if you speak to Mietiala, over 6,000 cows leave the north and get to Lagos, eaten as kebab, killed in the abattoirs, consumed, meaning that we actually have options, a get out of jail option. But what do? We still want to bring in imports. So you're not likely going to have Naira to dollar at one to one. It's going to be a struggle unless, like Doctor said, you sit down and ensure that there is an alignment between your fiscal and monetary policies. Ministry of Finance and Central Bank and all of the people who need to sit down, we need to actually have a town hall meeting to find out how we need to go back to how it used to be, where you had the pyramids. Nigeria is supposed to be number one on cassava, and Nigeria is supposed to be number one on yam. But as I speak, how well is Nigeria managing the yam exports? That is not just input for production, like he said. It's just primary products. Now, let me also tell you that the non-oil exports can actually help us get out of this. But again, you need to put a lot of things together, sensitization, to ensure that our people understand to add value before they export these things. I'll give you an example. The phone you have, the tablet you have, has a component in it that is found around Bauchi. The last time I checked, if you check the TikTok or some of the short videos that fly around in social media, a bag of it is illegally being mined and shipped to China for 2,000 Naira a bag. Now, I think Zimbabwe, it's escaping me now, the particular company, maybe Doc will help us. That company has a name. Zimbabwe has stopped the export of that component. So they could now begin to process theirs and export. If they start processing, it will create jobs, and whoever needs it should come to Zimbabwe and process it and then export it at a higher value. There are a few things we need to do if we put our house in order. If you brought intellectuals into a room to actually sweat this stuff, do not be mentally lazy to sweat the issues that we are dealing with. Deal with energy so that manufacturing goes on. Deal with the issue of infrastructure so that people are able to move goods and services. Deal with, census is coming, like Doc said. Are we going to do real census, authentic census, and ensure that we count human beings exactly the number of human beings we have, and not add cows and goats to it? Are we going to have the right kind of census to ensure that we have data on actually what is being produced in Nigeria and how many people are in Nigeria consuming what, so that we can plan to know who we produce for and who is going to consume what? And then again, I don't want to even get into the issue of the 500 billion that want to share 8,000 Naira to how many persons. We've done the little mathematics in my own office, and we found out that if you did 774 local government areas dividing 500 billion at the rate of 8,000, you're likely going to have about 15,000 persons in a local government area. If you form them into a cooperative society, and you focus them on exactly what it is that can be found in that area, even if it is, let's say, beans in Gombe, and you now turn the beans and say, okay, it can be used to fry akara in the southeast or southwest where a lot of it is consumed, then you have created a market. The challenges that MSMEs face are three. One, ideas generation, which is a function of, can we work on the mindset of our people to get more entrepreneurial? The average Nigerian hustles, but you can actually take it to the level of entrepreneurship, which is where I play. Now, as I speak, the MasterCard Foundation, where I serve as a mentor, is organizing a training for over 40,000 Nigerian youths to turn them to entrepreneurs, helping them to do trademarking, logo registration, NAFDAC registration, and all of the company registration. If they have all of that systems and structures, they're able to stand on their own and take advantage of what is found in the environment to produce, so that you can sell and increase whatever your GDP is. That's number one. The next one is access to finance. So if you have this 500 billion, I'd recommend that you rather form them into a cooperative society, so that there's economies of scale and they're able to produce, and then you do exchange of goods and services. Like Doc said, the things that are in the north are not the things in the south. You can even, within Nigeria alone, if you have enough data, move goods and services. The palm oil coming from the palm tree in Ngopwala or Isiolongwa or Isiomongwa can actually go to Sokoto, and you take the onions in Sokoto and bring it down to Lagos, and take the fish in Badagry. The crayfish that if you get into the Atlantic Ocean in Badagry, or even the Nigerian coconut, which is different from the Ghana coconut. These are statistics and data that we have had. And then do a business plan on this. Access to finance. Give that money to them to work as a team. The next one is access to markets. How much of Nigerian things do we consume? I deliberately wear this red cap and dress like this because I promote culture and I promote made in Nigeria. Not that I don't have suits to wear. I have suits bought from the Dubai Mall and bought from different places, but much of the things we wear here is either from Vietnam or from UK, or even the cars we drive. Mahatma Gandhi told the Indians, if you must drive a car, let it be an Indian-made car. If you must watch TV, let it be an Indian-made TV. And they came out with the Hindustan, and came out with the president, the best ever made Indian TV, and then the Hindustan, their first car. And today, where do you go for medical tourism? India. And I wouldn't even want to go into all of the issues around the disruptions within the system. If the doctors are not going to strike today, it is one other thing. How do you expect the foreign investors that we're all speaking to on social media? And then the next one is, how do we even give visibility to the things we do? Someone said, if the phone you're carrying does not make you money, throw it away. The young people want to do stuff, but we had a central bank that consistently kept staying staying behind the flow of history, where these young people want to sponsor their arts with $2, and you insisted that things must be done in a particular way. Now we've introduced the e-Naira. Where is National Orientation Agency to promote the e-Naira so that people understand what exactly that thing is for? Do you understand what it is for?
Indeed. All right, Dr. Obinaya, you've said a lot. All right, Dr. Emeka Okengu, let's move on. A quick question before we wrap up because of time. Okay, so you know, someone from the forex market, a trader, said that the demand is more than the supply, and he even complained that even commercial banks don't even have the dollar, so they go to them in order to get the dollars for their customers. And this is something, you know, coming after the president's speech, in his inaugural speech, of course. So also the chairman of WAPA Forex Market, Sani Dada, made the blame to be the government. He mentioned that the government is to blame on that, emphasizing on productivity, just like both of you have talked about this morning. So the question here today is, should the border be closed, you know, and can something be done? Because there was a time that the National Assembly were putting a motion of the Japa syndrome, saying that they should, you know, reduce the movement of people, and that is also increasing. It's one of the causes of the dollars, you know, increasing the demands, of course, because people when traveling want to have a dollar to travel with. So should the border be closed, and should the government have something to do, you know, with a lot of movement going outside the country? What's your take on that?
Well, let me first thank Dr. Bina, and please ask him how to keep my fish and
Oh, I think we lost Dr. Emeka Okengu. So right now, Dr. Obinaya, can you just...
He seemed very excited with the question.
Yes. I pray Doc comes back. Someone I respect so much.
Contribute. Sorry, I'm back here. Just keep my
passport. I love Nigeria. If not, I would have jabbed because of the sapa in this country. I sell palm oil, I sell plantain.
Okay, you see, you know, it's very simple, ladies. If you can hear me.
From Sabongidora, and I'm not a native doctor, so I will not hide my own secrets.
All right, Dr. Obinaya, please, we take a pause on that. Dr. Emeka is back, so I think we would like to, you know, hear from him because he seems to have a lot to say on that one.
The first question you're going to be asking is, what borders are you closing? Do you have any borders? If you're from northern Nigeria, my wife is from Adamawa. Okay, for those of you from the north, do we have any borders to close? Where you have more than 1,000 kilometers of open land, is that a border? That's question number one. If you close those borders, the last time we did, we closed both the northern and the southern borders. What happened? It created more problems because a lot of the foods that we consume actually come from across these borders. You have more rice coming in from the northern border than you have rice being produced in Nigeria. This is a fact. So I don't think it's all about closing borders. I think it's all about, you know, doing something Dr. Rappa had said, you know, listening to him. What you will see in the Nigerian parlance will be a motivational talker and not somebody who can become a resource. In other climes, Dr. Rappa should have been engaged by government to start helping small businesses to generate their business plans that can become feasible for funding. But what do you do with people like that? You invite him on television, and in trying to remain, you know, very patriotic, you know, he begins to also, like me, you know, begin to show some level of frustration. So the major problems we have is that if you're talking about the SBAs, go and look at the facts behind the figures. It is people like Dr. Rappa that are engaged by government, not only to mentor, not only to speak to patriotism, but to be able to, you know, put business plans that can work, that will now run, instead on collateral lending, will run on what they call cash flow based lending. Now, when you have things like this, and this is where your research institutes come. What's the relationship between our research institutes and our policy and our businesses? Now, if you're talking about closing the border, Haja, you're going to be making, you know, the dollar more expensive because the dollar right now is a good, and it's important to see it as that. The only goods that people are trading in now is dollar. And those who understand knew that the moment they took that policy of saying you are going to be having a single exchange market, everybody who was wise knew that dollar was going to be hitting 2,000. And please let me also predict that if you are not very careful, we are going to be hitting 2,000 and more, because it's become the only goods that people who have cash can be able to trade. And no matter how bad it is, even if it falls by 2 or 3 naira, it's going to be skyrocketing.
All right. We seem to have a technical
There's
issue
nothing.
with,
It is only thing the two tied to the dollar.
Okay, so just before we go, Dr. Urakba, now recently the president inaugurated a fiscal policy and tax reform committee, and we would actually want to hear a perspective on the 1-year mandate, that they actually have given to the fiscal. Given to the committee itself. Now, tax reforms on fiscal governance and growth facilitation, and how possible is it to actually achieve an 18% tax to GDP ratio in just 1 year?
It's possible in 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
If not earlier. I've had reason to engage the FOREX for years. I gave them a simple suggestion. You have the National Youth Service Corps that has over 600,000 corpers mobilized across about 6 batches every year. I even recommended to have, a CDS group,
okay,
for risk management or tax. And then, as I traveled around the country training on entrepreneurship and all of that, building the ecosystem, I got to Sokoto on one of those days, and I saw the voluntary tax declaration platform, and they came and approached me with form, even at the airport here. So they've tried a few things on their own. I have recommended to them to say Nigerians are not averse to paying tax. The only thing is that you cannot take something out of nothing. You have to give to take. If we build the ecosystem, and for instance, I was in the insurance industry, I still trained them. And what we did was what we call product bundling. So if we had like what we call an Okada scheme, we built insurance into it. So that if you said you didn't like insurance and you needed the Okada on hire purchase, as you repaid, maybe every day, if you use your Okada to transport, you return 500 naira per day, all of that. Or you're doing maybe a Bolt or Uber, and you return like 25,000 per week. Inside the 25,000 is insurance. And then if you came to the bank to take a loan, we had what we call credit life policy, where 2% of that was insurance. So indirectly, the people paid for insurance without knowing they had paid for it. Am I communicating? You can build tax into all of that. Now, I have begged, I have gone there. I'm still going to continue to say, now, when you talk about, I'm not a motivational speaker, I'm a personal development trainer. I take it from point A to point Z. And because of my experience as a copper, with 350 naira lawi in Doma, local government area, I was selling yam 6 naira, 8 naira, 12 naira. Moving yam from Doma to East, my lawi was 350. Today, coppers earn 33,000 naira. And if you had 10 coppers come together, that's how much. Now, I do not think it is rocket science. For us to tell ourselves the truth, there are 3 things you can never go wrong with in an economy that is prone to depression: food, health, and education. So if you want the real answer, it is possible in 3 months even. Okay. What you need to do is, you're a lady. No man, even if he says he's the younger brother of the senior pastor of my church or the younger brother of an imam, no man will approach you and say, I want to marry you, and I want the wedding to be next weekend. You ask him, are you suffering from malaria? First of all, there has to be 3 things you must do. There must be stakeholders mapping in Project Nigeria. Same way you have in-laws and you have other people who are involved in the marriage process. The next one is stakeholders engagement. The person has to tell you, will you marry me? Will you work with me? That's engagement. And probably put a ring in your engagement ring in your finger. I'm trying to be as simple as possible. Then the next one is stakeholders management. By the time you marry that lady into your house, then you realize that what the bitter cola sounds to the ear is not what it tastes in the mouth. Okay. You now realize that the lady needs to rub Vaseline, the lady needs to eat, and when she takes in, you need to go for antenatal and so on. What I'm trying to say is, to build a nation is like the marriage process. It takes a lot of work, and there's no dodging it. It's work. You have to start from training, get the mind cleared, then you set up a process, and when you have set up the process, you need to fund it. And when you fund it, then you delay your gratification and say, in the next 22 to 25 years, we need to recreate and recalibrate the mindset of Nigerians. It takes about 22 years to clear the mind of Nigerians from this import dependency and mindset of anything imported. It takes about 20 years to change that mindset. Then finally, when you have crossed that level, then you need to make Nigerians to believe in Project Nigeria. And it has to be all hands on deck, the public and private sector, that's stakeholders mapping I was talking about. But let me also settle it here. It's not all bad news. My people say bad ground, na better ground for native doctor. Meaning that all of us here are native doctors. And who is the native doctor? The native doctor is that one that had white chalk around his eyes. Had white chalk around his eyes. It's the same white apron that doctors wear in National Hospital. So in the traditional African society, the native doctor was the one that knew which shrub and which leaf was for the eyes and the one that was for the mouth. He had the skill and the training that the average person didn't have. Is it possible that we handhold our young people who are now being mentored by TV and cartoons from abroad? If we sat down here and told the story that Okongo was telling, did you know that to fly to London was as simple as 5,000? To fly to Lagos from Nsoka, Enugu area was like 15 naira. The Nigerian Airways that we had over 25 planes with engines, that now we have none. Yeah. We have any, and we have 55 countries, and you have the Africa Continental Free Area. You can't close borders, ma. The last time you close it, you cause trouble for us because you're supposed to be giant of Africa. The headquarters of ECOWAS is in Asokoro, and over 90% of the sponsorship is from you. It's as simple, and that's what they made you chairman of ECOWAS. So let's call a spade a spade. There are about 15 to 16 countries within the West Coast, if my statistics is not failing me, 55 countries in Africa, and with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. When I got to Ghana, I demanded to go to the headquarters to speak to the South African guy who is the head of the place, and I wanted to ask a question. Now, can we now move things from one country to the other? Can we add value to it so that we begin to even trade?
Sadly, Mr. Oragba, we have to actually
forgive me.
Stop this discussion here.
Indeed. Thank you so much for today's discussion. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Obinaya C. Uruakpa, a public affairs analyst. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And also thank you, Dr. Emeka Okengu, a development economist that joined us via Zoom. Thank you. Now,